Welcome to the Pizza Buffet, a part of the Hammer Betting Network, live on the Forward Progress channels on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Also live on the Hammer HQ on Twitter as well. This is a show on a weekly basis. I run through today's NFL card, top to bottom, rotation number order, and I lock in any bets that I think are still worth making. Voice is shot again today. It is what it is. We will power through. Today, I'll be locking in all bets against Pinnacle's lines because as of today, Pinnacle is the official sportsbook partner, of the Pizza Buffet. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sportsbook, and it's now available to all residents of Ontario, which is where I'm located. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. Must be 19 plus, and please play responsibly. Not available to U.S. customers. I often preach line shopping myself. I think that's still extremely important. I would never consider betting without Pinnacle being one of my sportsbook accounts because of the low hold. Very simple, win more, lose less when you're betting with Pinnacle, minus 104 instead of minus 110. I do imagine that a lot of the commentary is going to be around the mustache today. This will be probably the last mustache pizza buffet, because my wife cannot stand it, but it fit the costume yesterday. And that's it. It is and Justice for All shirt, Wesley, not a Master of Puppets shirt. And Justice for All. I'm going to get this a lot. The porn stash and the party voice. It is what it is. We will go through. So just want to let everyone know, if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Twitch, I am going to see your comments in real time, like the ones I just posted. Please join the conversation. I'll get to as many comments as I can today, answer any questions that you may have. If you're watching on Twitter, thank you for the support. I cannot see your comments in real time. Please jump over to the Forward Progress channel on YouTube or Twitch if you want to get in the conversation in real time. Also, just hit that subscribe button and you will get notified whenever I do go live in the future. All right. Let's get into it. Going to pull up Betstamp here. You can download Betstamp on Android or iOS. You can also check it out on the desktop version, which is what I have open here at betstamp.app.app. Great tool to track your bets and obviously to line shop as well. This is today's card. We will go top to bottom, rotation number order, and starting with the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. So looking at this here, full market has pretty much settled around 4, total of 41. I do like this game in some capacity. I'll just walk through it really quickly before I go ahead and lock in the play here. But the Atlanta defensive back injuries are no joke. AJ Terrell, week to week now. They obviously already have Casey Hayward on IR. Safety Jalen Hawkins is out. There's no guarantee D. Alford will play today. If he does, he's banged up. He was limited for the entire week in terms of practice. And some teams are able to overcome injuries in their secondary. Atlanta, though, in my opinion, is not, because they don't get pressure. They're dead last in the league in terms of pressure rate. And I think Carolina played a decent offensive game last week against the Buccaneers. I don't know that PJ Walker can replicate that, but I do think that offensively speaking, they're good enough to move the ball against this Falcons defense. Now, I'm not in the business of advocating that you constantly take the worst number in market. This is going to be a smaller play because I don't think that there's a ton of value remaining in this number. But I do like Carolina +4, minus 107 at Pinnacle for this game in particular. And just a couple other things to point out here. Atlanta's a heavy run team, right? They run 12% over expected on all plays. And Carolina has the top 4 rushing EPA defense in the entire league. In fact, when we just strip out garbage time this year, and I define garbage time as when one of the teams in the game has less than a 10% chance of winning the game, Carolina actually has the 5th best EPA as a whole on defense, 4th best success rate. The last thing I will say in regards to this game, Falcons have made people a lot of money this year, but they've done that in these big underdog roles. And now that completely flips to where they are expected to win by margin. So I like Carolina in this spot. Nothing crazy. For those out there wondering if, to play the money line, you definitely could do that as well. Plus 172 at Pinnacle right now in terms of the money line on that game. All right. Game number 2. Cowboys and Bears. So market is settled roughly around 10. The 10.5 plus 108 here at Pinnacle is very similar to these other 10 prices. Totals in the 42.5/43 range for today's game. I'll play this one as well. Small, again, half unit, but I'm going to play the Cowboys. I think this is a good price. Quickly get that in and tracked, and then I can go through the reasoning why. Chicago's O-line against the Cowboys D-line, or defensive front seven, I should say. Pretty big mismatch, in my opinion. The Bears without their starting center, Lucas Patrick, the right tackle as well. And when we look at Dallas's D this year, number 1 in the league with a 54% pass rush win rate. Their pressure is 5% higher than any other team in the league, just a little bit under 5% higher than any other team in the league. But they generate relentless pressure. Now going up against an O-line that is missing pieces, the Bears are going to try to run the ball. That really hasn't been an effective strategy against Dallas this year. Cowboys defense, number 8 in rush EPA, number 9 in success rate. And then on the other side of the ball, I think the biggest problem here is Chicago's run D, because they're 26th in EPA versus the run, 25th in success rate versus the run. Dallas is a heavy running team. They run 6% over expected, especially in short yardage. They run 22% over expected. The Zeke injury, to me, that's a non-factor. If anything, I slightly upgrade the Cowboys offense because I think Tony Pollard is better than Ezekiel Elliott. And I do think that with each passing week, Dak will round into form and they can start opening up this offense a little bit more. I did hear a lot of arguments this week, particularly about how, well, the Lions, basically comparing the Lions-Cowboys line to the Cowboys-Bears line this week, where it's like, well, if the Lions were only 7.5 point dogs, how can the Bears be this big of an underdog in the game? There's not that much difference between the Lions and the Bears. Just to counter that was Dak Prescott's first game back, relative uncertainty for the Cowboys last week. But on top of that, the Bears just went to New England on Monday Night Football. It was pretty much one-sided action, got all the way up to 9.5 by kickoff, and now we're basically saying Dallas is a half point better in market than the Patriots, and I disagree with that. I think the Dallas Cowboys are better than that. So if you want to use the line value argument for the Dallas-Detroit game last week, I could also do the same thing for the Bears game as well. All right. Take a sip of the coffee this morning. And we are going to move on. Game number 3. Dolphins and Lions. Market has pretty much settled at 3.5 across the board. Total at 52, some 51.5. I did have some early week interest in this over. Never really got to the number that I was hoping for, which was 51. Never ended up playing it. I won't have a play on this game. Miami struggled, obviously, offensively against Pittsburgh last week. I don't think they're going to face much resistance here. Detroit secondary is a mess. They do have injuries on defense still. No hope, in my opinion, to defend Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. On top of that, you look at Detroit getting to the quarterback, 4.4 sack percentage this year. That's the 7th lowest number in the entire league. Their pressure rate is a bit better, but they also blitz at the 4th highest rate in the league. So they're blitzing a lot. They're not getting nearly as much pressure relative to those blitzes. They're not getting home. The only thing I will say about Detroit's defense and why I ended up choosing not to play Miami at this number, because it was only ever a consideration as to whether I wanted to play Miami or not in this game, is that the Lions defense might look worse than it actually is so far this year. And that's not to say that I think the Lions defense is good or whatever, but we obviously all think of the Lions defense as being horrible. And they have played the Eagles, the Vikings, the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Cowboys. They've played a bunch of good offenses or above average offenses this year. I also think that the Lions offense is due for some positive regression. Haven't talked about the returning players, but obviously St. Brown being back at receiver is huge for them if he can stick around for a full game. This is a team that did, they scored into the mid-30s on Philly and Washington. Miami has a bad secondary. They're dealing with cluster injuries in the secondary. So ultimately, a game that I decided not to play, made the number roughly like minus 3.7 on Miami, just never got the price that I would have needed to play them over the course of the week. About to start the second half here in London, just did start the second half. That was a very weird first half in that it looked like Jacksonville probably could have stomped Denver in the early going. The Trevor Lawrence interception in the end zone was a massive game changer in that one specifically. All right. Game number 4, Cardinals and Vikings. I don't want to make any guarantees, but this will probably be the largest play I have on the board today, which will just be a standard unit on Arizona. I make this game much closer to 3, like kind of right on 3. I don't actually see a ton of difference between these two teams. I do think that the Vikings are marginally better. The Vikings do get to come off of the bye week as well, which is big, although somewhat countered by Arizona having extra rest as well. But the Cardinals offense, obviously a lot of you guys and girls watching this show out there are football fans. You've probably seen the staggering difference in offensive numbers with or without DeAndre Hopkins on the field for the Cardinals offense. And I don't think it's a surprise that Kyler Murray had his best EPA per play of the season last week with DeAndre Hopkins returning. Game-changing receiver, changes everything that they want to do offensively. And when we look at the Vikings defense, they've given up the most yards per pass attempt in the entire league this year at 7.9. They've faced a run of pretty bad quarterbacks as well. I don't want to necessarily say pretty bad, but obviously people we don't consider to be upper echelon in Andy Dalton, Justin Fields. They had the game with where Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater both played. So I think Arizona can move the ball on the Vikings defense, which is, we can talk about the interior O-line injuries for the Cardinals. The backups have played fairly well. I don't think it's that steep of a drop-off. I also don't think that the Vikings are the team that's necessarily going to expose those problems. And then on the other side of things, you have Kirk Cousins, who, when he's not been blitzed this year, has been very good. He has an 83.9 PFF grade when he hasn't been blitzed this year. When he has been blitzed, he has a 50.4 PFF grade. So very drastic drop-off in his production, or his grading, I should say. In terms of turnover-worthy plays, on all plays, 2.1%. When he's blitzed, 5.9%. So he now goes from someone who's pretty protective of the ball to someone who's very careless with the ball. And this is very important in this game specifically, in my opinion, because you have Vance Joseph as the defensive coordinator for the Cardinals, who blitzes at the second highest rate in the league, roughly 37% of the time. On top of that, you strip out this week 1 game against Kansas City for the Cardinals defense, where they basically had a ton of injuries, really, especially in the secondary. J.J. Watt was hurt as well. And if we remove that game and we look at just weeks 2 to 7, the Arizona defense is actually 8th in EPA per play since then. And they've played the Eagles offense, they've played the Raiders offense, they've played the Seahawks offense. So it's not like they've just been feasting on a bad schedule. I do think eventually Minnesota might go to the playoffs as like a 13-4 team, just by virtue of the schedule that they face and the fact that the NFC is not very good. But they've had a very lucky schedule to date. They played week 1, Green Bay, bunch of injuries for the Packers. That blowout win looks much less impressive now that we know what the Packers are. Week 3, they played Detroit with a bunch of offensive injuries and defensive injuries. Week 4, they played the Saints. That was, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry. Like, basically, we know the Saints are dealing with major injuries. Week 5, they played the Bears, who are terrible. Week 6, they benefit from the Dolphins quarterback situation, and they got badly outplayed in that game as well. So, yeah, I mean, I just can't get to this number. I think Arizona is very live in this game. Randy Mitchell says he took some Cardinals 10-1 to win the NFC West. I kind of like that. I don't know that the Cardinals are going to, but you basically need them to win one out of, the implied probability is 10% there. With the status of the current NFC West, Seattle's still a huge wild card. 49ers dealing with injuries. Rams come off a bye, but we honestly have no idea what they are at this point. So who knows if they're actually going to get it together at any point or not. All right, we move on. Next game is going to be the Raiders and Saints. Okay. First and foremost, just so everyone knows, Raiders were dealing with like a large flu situation amongst the team this week. Lots of guys not practicing. Doesn't look like it's going to have an impact in terms of anyone actually missing the game today. However, that's not to say everyone is going to be at 100% either. And this is obviously like pure speculation, but for anyone out there who has had the flu, you obviously, you sweat a lot. People know what the flu is like. You don't just go back to 100% very quickly, right? It does take some time, put weight back on, get your strength back, so on and so forth. So again, pure speculation. I'm not a guy who loves narratives or whatever, but I feel like that needs to be talked about and accounted for. Reason I mention that is because if that had not happened or transpired with the Raiders midweek, I would probably be interested in betting them here. I'm personally going to just choose to lay off because of the unknown, but wouldn't blame anyone who wanted to do that. We look at the board now, they've kind of settled in as a 1-point favorite in the range of, depending on the sportsbook, looks like Pinnacle has one of the best prices in market on the Raiders, 118. They have one of the best prices in market on both sides, actually, just because of the low VIG. And the total has come down to 48.5. So particularly with this game, the Saints defense is a real problem right now. They can't generate pressure. They can't stop the run. Marshawn Lattimore is out. Their third best corner, nickel corner, Bradley Roby, is on IR. PJ Williams is on IR. Paulson Adebo is banged up. And I know that the Raiders went through the flu this week, but and Darren Waller, who gave it a go in pregame warmups, or not even pregame warmups, just on the field this morning, is not going to play. But Hunter Renfrow now has no injury designation. And I like the Raiders offense a lot right now. They're one of only 8 teams in the league that's above average in both rushing and passing EPA. Their offense is now quietly up to number 4 overall in EPA per play. The Saints are kind of an enigma because turnovers have plagued them all year. They're still number 2 in net success rate. They're dead last in turnover margin. They're better than advertised. And when people think of them, they think of, not a great team. They've been consistently killed by turnovers. But I don't know that Andy Dalton or at some point Jameis Winston are going to be the quarterbacks that ever fix that. I think there's just going to be a consistent theme in that this goes on for a lot of the year. And this is reflected in the numbers, right? I mean, if you look at Andy Dalton this year, he's number 4 in success rate amongst quarterbacks. That's very high, but he's 15th in EPA per play because the turnovers are killing him. I will say one thing about the Saints as well, though, that I think goes unnoticed. I'm guilty of this myself because I do think New Orleans is better than we give them credit for. But if we strip out garbage time, and I define garbage time exactly as I mentioned earlier, when one team has less than a 10% chance of winning, Andy Dalton's numbers drop significantly. It goes down to number 22 in EPA per play. So a lot of what the Saints have done offensively has come when they are trailing in games as well. Okay. Pool purposes, I would pick the Raiders, but just too much unknown, like I had mentioned. Patriots and the Jets. Market here has settled at 3. Pretty much everywhere. Obviously, you get some crazy prices here or there, depending on the different regulated sports books. Total at 40. Did see a lot of interest or some PPH accounts betting under this morning on this game. Hard for me to argue that. For those who consume the other content that I do over the course of the week, you will know that I do like the Patriots today. I did bet the Patriots today. I'm just going to flat out say it for those out there. If I had woke up this morning and did this show and I had no bets on this game, I would not be betting the Patriots right now at the current market number. Even though I do like the matchup, I do think that the market has kind of settled in the correct spot. So I'm not going to go ahead and lock in a bet here. I will talk about why I specifically like New England in this matchup. But I think the Jets are, I don't want to use the word frauds. It's just going to upset an entire, it's going to upset an entire group of, fan base or whatever. But they're obviously not as good as their record indicates. Or at least I think there's a high probability that they're not as good as their record indicates. 3 of the last 4 weeks, they've played a backup quarterback or a rookie quarterback. They got Brett Rippon, Kenny Pickett, Skylar Thompson. Now they come in this week. They lose Breece Hall, which in my opinion, I've talked about this before. I'm not a running backs don't matter guy. I think for the large part, they don't. But Breece Hall to me is someone that they could really rely on in their offense. And I think his absence will be noticeably missed. They do acquire James Robinson, but also the Elijah Vera Tucker injury is big for them because this is a team that's already been dealing with, sort of cluster injuries on the offensive line this year, which I don't think people realize because most of these guys are on IR, but Mekhi Becton, George Fant, Max Mitchell, all being out, you add Vera Tucker to that mix, and it just hurts that O-line even more. Zach Wilson has been on the field for 126 plays this year. He ranks 27th of 31 quarterbacks in EPA per play that have been on the field for at least 126 plays this year. The only quarterbacks that have been worse than Zach Wilson have been Russell Wilson, Davis Mills, Carson Wentz, and Baker Mayfield. Number 26, right ahead of Zach Wilson, just to put things into perspective, was Matt Ryan, who is getting benched and probably not going to play for the rest of the season, at least not in a starting capacity. So that's the productivity they've gotten out of the quarterback position overall. And as bad as the Patriots defense looked on Monday Night Football, this is 2 times this year the Patriots defense has gone up against a mobile quarterback in Justin Fields and earlier in the year in Lamar Jackson, and those quarterbacks really hurt them. Zach Wilson is more of a drop-back passer. We've seen the Patriots excel at defending these types of quarterbacks this year. So I really like the matchup for the Patriots defense. On the other side of things, I did a show with my friend Cam Stewart earlier this week where he said that Mac Jones is the most overrated quarterback. I personally think that Mac Jones is one of the most underrated quarterbacks. Here's the thing with Mac Jones and calling someone overrated. People have to think that he's good in order for you to say overrated. Most of the general consensus is that the Patriots would be better off with Bailey Zappi or, Mac Jones is going to be a bust. And the reality is, if we go back to the start of last season, Mac Jones is 8th in quarterbacks among success rate since the beginning of last season. He moves the offense really well, doesn't do anything super flashy. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that he's elite or anything like that, but relative to perception, I think he's better than people give him credit for. Even if he's not, they do have a backup option in Bailey Zappi who can come in to a game if they are struggling. So right now, that's where I stand. I think that's the breakdown of the game whatsoever. If the Jets get in any negative game script and he needs to throw them back in the game, could get ugly. I agree with that. Just upset all New York City called Jets and Giants frauds. Depends on how you classify a fraud, right? Because obviously the Giants and Jets are not as good as their records would indicate. That does not mean that they're as bad as people think they are either. So, yeah. What was the opening line? I actually don't know what the opening line is, but it did sit at -1.5 for a lot of the week. I believe when the Mac Jones announcement came, that the money moved in towards the Patriots. Jets team total, can they score 20? I mean, they can. I don't see it as being a super likely range of outcomes, as the Denver Broncos are now ahead 14-10. Nice drive to start the second half there for them. All right. We keep powering through. Still in the 1 o'clock games, the last of the 1 o'clock games. We have the Steelers and the Eagles. I will keep this one very, very brief because I did not come remotely close to betting this week. Philadelphia did get bet this morning. For those who have followed the pizza buffet for years now, or just anything I say relative to this, or just like if you follow the betting market, the Eagles get bet on game day almost every week. So what that entails is that there's someone out there that is a successful bettor, because the market moves towards the Eagles. So someone out there who's a successful bettor, who's betting these games, that has regularly believed that the Eagles are undervalued in market. That happens today. Just one thing to note for everyone going forwards: if you do bet earlier in the week, things of that nature, you probably do not want to bet against Philadelphia earlier in the week. You might as well just wait till game day. If you do like the Eagles, it's usually probably a good idea to bet them quickly over the course of the week. Obviously, that's not a 100% rule. It's just something that I've definitely noticed over the past couple of seasons. And I think if you go back and look at a bunch of Eagles games, you will probably notice the exact same thing. So Pittsburgh's managed to survive defensively in back-to-back weeks. First against Tampa Bay, numerous secondary injuries, without their top three corners, without Minkah Fitzpatrick. Last week against Miami, I think people are starting to think that, okay, the Pittsburgh defense is fine. The Eagles are another breed against mediocre defenses. Like, Philadelphia will move the ball against bad defenses. They've consistently done that this year. Look up and down the schedule. They've kind of consistently moved it against everyone except for Dallas, and Dallas is a team that generates some pressure. Arizona as well. And I talked earlier in the show about how the Cardinals defense is getting a lot better. Pittsburgh's going to look enticing here to a lot of the more casual bettors, trends-based bettors. I do bring it up because it is something that some other people value. I don't put a whole lot of stock into it, but Mike Tomlin as an underdog typically attracts Steelers money. This has been a spot that has been good for Pittsburgh going across. I mean, obviously, a lot of those games are Ben Roethlisberger, but this is something that is applied for many years. I don't particularly see this as a great matchup for the Steelers offense and Kenny Pickett going up against two good cover corners. So that can kind of erase the top two options for the Steelers. And the Philly D-line against the Pittsburgh O-line, probably one of the biggest mismatches on paper this week as well in terms of in the trenches. One other thing to note: Pittsburgh's kicker, Chris Boswell, who is fairly reliable, is out for this game. So that might change their decision-making in-game for this one as well. All right. Into the later games. Tennessee and Houston. Okay, this one is now settled in to Tennessee -1. So the big news, obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, you should probably know by now if you're betting the NFL on a Sunday, is that Ryan Tannehill didn't make the trip for Tennessee. He is out for this game. Malik Willis will start at quarterback for the Titans. You saw money come in on Houston yesterday. There were some 2.5s available at Pinnacle and across other sharp books, and then they dropped, I think, all the way down to this range and pick them, and it's kind of just stayed in this range since. I don't love betting games with huge unknowns unless I can really feel like I can take a stance and I have something figured out that maybe the market doesn't. But for me, Tennessee is a very hard team to figure out in the first place. Now you add in the complexity of a backup quarterback, and I don't know. From a yards per play perspective, I think the Titans could be wrong here. Pretty certain I'm right. If I'm not right, it's bottom 5 for sure. But I think they have the worst net yards per play in the league this season. Typically, not an indicator of a good team. However, if we adjust their EPA and their success rate on both sides of the ball to the quality of competition that they have faced, we get the number 9 EPA offense, number 14 success rate offense, number 12 EPA D, number 9 success rate D. So no worse than 14th in schedule adjusted EPA or success rate. So then there's that part of me that says, oh, maybe the Titans aren't that bad. It looks worse than it is. But then you look into, essentially, I'll call them luck factors, but it doesn't mean that they're just getting lucky. There might be something to it. But if you look at the red zone touchdown percentage, it's 80% at scoring TDs this year. They don't turn the ball over. These are things that, maybe Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. It's very possible. I would expect that to give in eventually, but maybe not against Houston. The Houston D-line without Jonathan Greenard, who I talked about last week, is awful. They're getting blown off the ball regularly. They give up the most explosive runs in the league. This team gives up the most explosive passes in the league. It's not a good defense overall. I do think that there's a scenario where potentially we just have Tennessee come out with Willis and Henry and just run the ball heavily, and they might still be able to move it. I'm not sure, not 100%, but I do feel like it's a game where the Titans will try to do that. They'll work in some occasional play action, but I don't know if that's going to be successful or not, because the Texans are likely going to try to stack the box and guard against that. I don't have a lot of faith in the Texans offense overall. Davis Mills, to me, not a starting quarterback in this league. Nico Collins out at receiver. Brandon Cooks is banged up. Do have to look for the status, and I haven't seen it yet. If anyone in the YouTuber Twitch chat knows if Jeffrey Simmons is listed as active or inactive, or if it has been announced yet, that would be a big one for the Titans on defense overall. But other than that, I don't think there's a valuable bet to be made in this game. I think, I made this roughly a pick 'em, and that's where we are at the moment. Okay, continuing on in the later window. What else do we got in the late window today? Because certainly don't want to watch that one. Okay, another one that I'm not going to be so excited to watch. Washington and Indy. A lot of what I just said in the Titans-Houston breakdown will apply here as well, in that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Like, I don't know what Ellinger is going to be at quarterback for the Colts. I know he's much more mobile than Matt Ryan. I know that's going to lead to a very different offense being run than what is traditionally run, right? With this team. So I don't know what to make of Indianapolis this week. I have no idea. Would I be interested in betting Indy here? No, because I think needing the Colts to win by 4 with an unproven quarterback is probably a bad bet more often than not. They do get Shaq Leonard back on defense today. That's nice for them that they have, kind of their defensive leader back on the field. But this would only ever be Commanders or nothing for me. And I don't have a strong enough opinion on the game. One thing of note, though, Commanders middle linebacker Cole Holcomb is out for Washington, obviously, which if they do get him on the move a lot more and he is scrambling, that could be a potentially like low-key injury, because they've actually had a bunch of linebackers that have already gone on IR so far this year. Not a game that I've really ever considered betting at any point over the course of the week. San Fran and the Rams. I'm going to go against my better judgment and take the Rams to win this game for a small bet. I get all the reasons why anyone would not want to make this bet. Completely understandable. I also had to talk myself into, betting the Rams this week overall. But I do not think we can ignore the San Francisco injuries in this game. So a few things, obviously, to talk about. That's definitely one of them. The Debo injury is very big for the offense. So is Kyle Juszczyk being out. My friend Fabian Suma, who I'm going to be doing prime time with tonight on the Hammer Betting Network. You can go to subscribe to the Hammer HQ channel on YouTube, on Twitch. We will go live prior to Sunday Night Football and at the half as well. He made a good case for why Kyle Juszczyk is so valuable to that offense overall and how he thinks the 49ers offense will fall off without Kyle Juszczyk there. I tend to agree. It was very convincing. On top of that, you have a team that's dealing with defensive injuries. Obviously, Emmanuel Mosley IR, that was a few weeks ago, but Eric Armstead is out on the defensive line again. Their weak side linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, is out. These are pretty big losses in the front seven, especially where you consider where the 49ers have consistently exploited the Rams, both in this year and past years as well, has been in their ability to generate a pass rush. And I'm not saying that they won't, but I don't think we're going to see them do it at the same consistency that they have done recently. On top of that, while I'm very concerned about the Rams' offensive line, their left tackle, Joe Noteboom, is out. Their left guard, David Edwards, is out. They do get a big returning player in Brian Allen, who's coming back at center. I think that's very big for this offensive line. I also think the fact that they're coming off of a bye week where they're able to reshuffle players around, put together the best five, and figure out a game plan against a team that has consistently had success against them is something that is of value. So I like the Rams a little bit here. Nothing crazy. Cannot ignore Kyle Shanahan versus Sean McVay in the past and the way that the 49ers beat the Rams earlier this year. But I do think that there is reason to think that that might change overall. Denver still up 14-10 late in the third quarter. Broncos defense, man, is just really good. Really good. Considering Baron Browning is out now too, and Randy Gregory, and they're still able to accomplish this. Really, really well done for the Denver Broncos to be able to limit Jacksonville after that scripted opening drive. All right. Probably the, I don't want to say the game of the day, but definitely one that people are going to be paying attention to. So the Giants are getting close to a range where I would consider betting them. Tough to do. Obviously, with the reports that DK Metcalf is going to play today, market has swung a little bit to Seattle this morning. I always kind of thought it would swing to Seattle, as the Giants tend to get faded in market pretty regularly, but don't really totally love the matchup for Seattle. Geno Smith, I talked about Kirk Cousins earlier, numbers when he's blitzed versus when he's not blitzed. I look at those for Geno as well. He's a pretty drastic quarterback in terms of splits versus the blitz and not. And when you look at Geno's worst performance this season, that was 2 weeks ago against Arizona. Now, the Seahawks won that game 19-9 on the backs of their defense, but Geno Smith did not play all that well. The Seahawks offense did not play all that well. I mention that because the Cardinals are the number 2 blitz rate team in the entire league. The Giants are number 1. Now, definitely would have liked this a lot more if DK Metcalf was out, because then you can blitz heavily. You don't have 2 great receivers that can get separation in the secondary. You only really have one. But this kind of changes the dynamic a little bit, where Geno can get the ball out a little bit quicker to his receivers. Seattle also should be able to run the ball well, as the Giants struggle against the run. We'll see if Kenneth Walker has another big game, but very possible. Just really tough for me to get to needing Seattle to win by 4 in a game that, where you have the Giants coaching staff against the Seahawks coaching staff. It feels to me like the Giants are that team By the way, let me watch my words very carefully here with what I'm about to say. But feels like the Giants remind me a lot of the Patriots in like early Tom Brady years. And then like me. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the quality of the team on the field. I'm talking about how they consistently outperform their metrics. Like you would look at those Patriots in early years and you'd see the yardage totals, yards per play. We didn't have success rate in EPA at that time. And you would say to yourself, how does this team keep finding a way to win on a weekly basis? And they just found a way to win. And ultimately, it was obviously having a Hall of Fame quarterback, but also a really well-coached team. And the Giants feel like that team right now. Where on a weekly basis, you scratch your head and you're like, this has to turn, this has to turn. And then maybe it just doesn't turn because there's something that's happening there that's not reflected in the metrics consistently. So really tough one, but lean very strongly to the Giants. Connor asks, have Seattle minus 130. Would you recommend playing back on Giants plus 3.5? So the general response in these types of situations is only if you think that Giants 3.5 is still a valuable bet. Like if you bet Seattle minus 130 and then you make the game Seattle minus 4, you would never play back on the Giants plus 3.5. That would make absolutely no sense to do. So, I mean, it really depends on your own personal prerogative on the game. Looking at the money line now with Seattle being minus 164, it's a decent middle opportunity, I would say, or a bet where you can win actually both with like a Seattle by 3, which I think is the most likely outcome in the game. But you definitely have to have an edge on the 3.5 in order to play it. Okay, we'll get into our final game here. Is it the final game? Yep. Sunday Night Football. Packers and Bills. People just keep expecting the Packers to flip a switch. Now, granted, this is there was 2 teams in market this week where the market really kind of flipped on them for a large portion of the week. The first one was the Bucs, where opening numbers came out. Baltimore got bet a ton. And then obviously the late money comes in on the Bucs. They lose. They played a bad game. This is a pretty sizable downgrade week over week to, get Green Bay into double-digit underdog territory. I believe had this game been played last week, we would not see this number. So there will be people who are, there's like an appeal of line value with the Packers. To me, with each passing week, I'm downgrading Green Bay more and more. Their offense is struggling. Now they're without Alan Lazard, which wouldn't be like a big loss to a lot of teams, but is a big loss to Green Bay because they just don't have enough receivers that are good. I mean, look at last week. They suffered from a lot of drops. Yes. And, it's one of those things like, well, if the Packers receivers caught those balls, well, the Packers receivers aren't very good is the problem. So I don't know that that's going to just amend itself going forwards. Aaron Rodgers can't practice because he has a thumb injury. I mean, basically what Green Bay has to do here is they have to try to run the ball and really shrink the game as much as they possibly can, right? Keep Josh Allen on the sidelines. Maybe it can happen. It's possible. Buffalo hasn't been like the best rush D over the course of the past few years. But to me, I'll say this, like it's possible that we're still not even rating the Bills good enough yet. I truly believe that. Like the Bills are a machine. They consistently blow out teams when they win games for the most part. I mean, the Chiefs game was a little bit closer, but they consistently blow out teams over and over and over. And this is not enough I'm even more inclined to take Buffalo than I am Green Bay. If we were to get late money on the Packers, I would strongly consider the Buffalo Bills in this game. All right. That was a pretty quick run through today. I'll do a quick recap of the picks that have been logged so that we can find them. By the way, I point this out for anyone who's new here. Closing line value metrics on Sunday, I don't really care about them. I do care about closing line value, which is why the vast majority of my bets come earlier on in the week and not on Sunday. I would highly advise most people bet earlier on the week wherever they can to try to get out ahead of market moves. At this point, all the plays I've locked in today are plays where there has essentially been market resistance. So someone likes the other side, or I feel that the game has not moved far enough, which, I mean, could or couldn't be the case. It's very challenging to win on Sundays in the NFL, especially if you're betting large amounts of money on Sundays in the NFL. Carolina, +4, -107. You can now find that -103 at Pinnacle. Cowboys, 10.5, +108. Arizona, +4, -104, now -101 at Pinnacle. And the Rams, -106. As a reminder, all bets today locked in Pinnacle and will be Pinnacle going forwards because they are now the official sportsbook partner of Pizza Buffet. They are the world's sharpest sportsbook, now available in Ontario. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. I've had a Pinnacle account forever now. Highly, highly recommend it. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. Not available in the US, but definitely having a low hold book will be huge overall in the long run for anyone who's betting out there. All right, I'll answer some questions now for the next few minutes or so. Any quick thoughts on Monday night's game for pool play? I guess it really depends on your number, but the injury situation for Cleveland's defense is not looking very good right now. I think the market reacted very quickly to the Jamar Chase injury, and then you saw that the Bengals just got bet back up again. I do not want to personally step in front of the Bengals right now. I think they're slowly starting to get their offense together. If we use season-long metrics for Cincinnati, I think they paint a very different picture of the Bengals versus where they are at right now. And I mean, I would probably play the Bengals for pools plays. That would be my most likely scenario. What are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence? I did a lot of watching Trevor Lawrence in the offseason last year. There was a lot of good posts about how he actually didn't really play all that bad last season relative to the way that he was graded and his EPA per play. And he was, not really helped out by his receivers a whole lot. There was some truth to that, but he's still been making some catastrophic errors this year. The red zone interception this morning was just horrible. Like, you can't do that, period. I know he's a second-year quarterback, but this Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be a generational talent, essentially. Like, bona fide number one draft pick. You would not consider anyone else in that draft at number one overall. And he just, he's not looking like he's going to live up to that. That's not to say that it can't change, but where he's at right now is a below average quarterback, in my opinion. Is this sort of thinking spewy? Not familiar with the word spewy, but I took the Pittsburgh Philly game total field goal blindly when Boswell was announced out, and they didn't have a kicker on their 53 yesterday. So I'm asking if you're saying you went and bet Pittsburgh Philly field goals under immediately when Boswell was announced out, then I think that that's probably a good bet, because that's not information that the market would have accounted for, and now they would. What's your grading differential for Jones and Zappe? Don't want to give out the exact number, and I will say I do things very differently than most people do them. So I often hear things like, oh, this quarterback is a 3-point downgrade from this quarterback. For me, it's very dependent on the matchup a lot of times. Don't want to give away too much, but it's not apples to apples. It's not the same thing every single game. I think Mac Jones is better than Bailey Zappe right now. I think the market was correct to upgrade the Patriots as soon as Mac Jones was announced as starter. That's not a criticism of Zappe, who I think can probably be a very good pro. If all things go well, I like what I've seen from him so far this year for the most part, but I do think that right now Jones is a slight upgrade over Bailey Zappe. All right, programming notes. I'm back tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Myself, Fabian Somer, prime time. We'll break down the Sunday night football game. We'll get Suma's thoughts on Bills and Packers, and we will give out props for that game. If you are not subscribed to the Hammer HQ on YouTube, do that. Click that subscribe button. Same thing on Twitch. You'll get notified when we go live, both for pregame and for the half. I will also be live at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time tonight, filming Forward Progress with Clive Bixby. For those that don't know, we will recap some of what we saw today, where the market will typically overreact or underreact, and we'll go ahead and we'll guess what the lines will be for week 9 in the NFL, and more importantly, how we see them moving over the course of the week and which teams will generate market interest. That'll be 10:30 p.m. Eastern time tonight. If you don't want to watch it live, that's fine. You can tune in tomorrow on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube as well. But make sure that you follow the Forward Progress channel on YouTube and on Twitch. That is going to be it for me. Good luck to everyone with their bets today. Unless you're opposite me of them, then I can't wish you luck on those specific ones. But hopefully you still have a winning day today. This has been the Pizza Buffet presented by Pinnacle on the Hammer Betting Network. Peace.